Welcome to ScreenCrush, I'm Ryan Airy, and this is all of the Easter eggs, references, and little things that you might have missed in WandaVision, Episode 8. The episode is titled Previously On, referring to the recaps TV shows place before their intros. T-Fast-Steves on Twitter pointed out that when Wanda has read Previously On, she's become more subdued every episode as she gets closer to her present-day trauma.
Previously on WandaVision. Previously on WandaVision.
The Marvel logo fades to Agatha purple and is obscured by her magic, showing that she is in control of this episode. Similarly, in the pilot, the logo faded into black and white to show that we were in Wanda's world. The episode opens in Salem, 1693, the year the real-life Salem witch trials took place. Now, in reality, those events are a stain on human history, where women were murdered for being mentally ill, having skin disorders, or just dancing. But in the MCU, it's revealed that the event was actually about witches persecuting their own, Agatha Harkness. Marvel has incorporated sci-fi and fantasy concepts into real-life historical events before, like in Thor and Captain America: The First Avenger. In the comics, Agatha is also alive during the Salem witch trials and was burned at the stake by her fellow witches. But that wasn't until hundreds of years later. But in the comic, her fellow witches turned on her to summon her dead son from the grave. Here, it's because she studied forbidden magic and has become too powerful.
You practice the darkest of magic.
The Salem witch trials occurred on June 2nd, which Agnes says is the day of her wedding anniversary.
The only way Ralph would remember our anniversary is if there was a beer named June 2nd.
The witches are chanting Latin, which I don't speak, but Kurdic Zoltan Gabor on Twitter told me that they're basically calling her a monster and saying that she has to die. The prologue establishes that Agatha is always trying to probe deeper into the dark arts and learn as much new magic as she can. This is what brought her to Westview. When she sees or senses Wanda's illusion, she arrives to study her. Unless she's the one who drew her here to begin with, but I'll go into that a little later in the video. Notice that the head witch has a crown made of purple energy. Screen Rant pointed out that this looks a lot like the crown of Zarad-Na, an ancient Atlantean sorceress from the comics. Now perhaps this means that these witches all practice Atlantean magic. The book could also be the Tome of Zarad-Na, which contains the sum knowledge of Atlantean sorcery. This, of course, could be a big hint that Namor is going to be introduced in the MCU. Now, presumably, this Queen Witch's station was tied to the brooch that Agatha steals from her, that she's worn in almost every scene in WandaVision. In a past video, I speculated that this was the Norns, the Asgardian witches that Thor communicates with in Age of Ultron.
It is of the six, the infinite six.
But someone on my Twitter also suggested that these three figures represent the Mother, Maiden, and Crone. This is a Wiccan triple moon goddess that represents three phases of life, the moon, and womanhood. But this archetype has actually appeared in some form in myths going all the way back to ancient Greece. If you're going to apply this to WandaVision, then Monica would be the Maiden, Wanda would be the Mother, and Agatha would be the Crone. Then we go to Agatha in her basement with Wanda. Agatha has devoted her whole life to studying magic, and she seems offended that it comes so easily to Wanda.
Magic on autopilot. What's your secret, sister?
Now, in the comics, Agatha is Wanda's mentor. She may still take on that role here, but for now, she's more just jealous of her power. She's Salieri to Wanda's Mozart. Now, you'll notice that these runes are contained within hexagons. This implies that witchcraft takes hexagonal shape. This idea of different magic taking on different shapes fits perfectly within the MCU. Doctor Strange and the other sorcerers practice eldritch magic. The magic they pull from other dimensions takes on symmetrical shapes. This line,
That accent really comes and goes, doesn't it?
is pretty meta because, as we know, Elizabeth Olsen's Sokovian accent pretty much disappeared after 2 movies.
You said we would destroy the Avengers.
What does it say?
Now, Agatha says to Senor Scratchy.
She does look shocked to meet the real us, doesn't she?
Now, I don't think that this means that her rabbit is her son Nicholas Scratch or Mephisto in disguise. It's just her familiar, an animal whose spirit is bound to hers that she can also imbue with magical transformative powers. Hopefully this means we get to see a badass rabbit fight in the finale. But this line really threw me.
When I sensed this place, the afterglow of so many spells cast all at once.
So does that mean that it's a coincidence that Vision bought Wanda an empty lot next to a house with a witch basement underneath it? That's too big of a coincidence for me. I've got a couple theories on who can be behind this that I'll go into later in the video. She also says,
Did you forget who's got your children stashed away in her bewitched basement?
because the actual house they used for the exterior is the house from the show Bewitched. Very cool. But then Agatha reveals something that I didn't expect.
I tried to be gentle,
to nudge you awake from this ridiculous fantasy.
Now this reframes the reveal from last episode.
It's been Agatha.
All along.
What?
We learned that Wanda did create Westview and is mind controlling these people, although she's probably doing it subconsciously. But Agatha was actually trying to break Wanda out of this spell. She tried to reveal Wanda's magic to the town by sabotaging the Magic Act, then used Herb to rouse Vision's suspicions, and then later she just did it directly.
Are you here to help us?
As the director in episode 7, she tries to help Wanda take responsibility for what she's done.
Do you think maybe this is what you deserve?
And maybe she's not really a dog murderer because there's not really a dog. Wanda invented it out of nowhere. Or Agatha could have just been testing Wanda's powers to see if she could raise the dead.
You can do that?
But most importantly, there's the reveal of HYDRA.
It wasn't literally me, just my eyes and ears. A crystalline possession.
This doesn't tell us where he came from. Is HYDRA actually Peter from the Fox X-Men universe, here as part of a wider multiverse that contains the Fox X-Men movies? Or is this just some guy that Agatha mind controls? It doesn't seem like Agatha has the power to pull other beings from the multiverse. So I'm going to say no to him being from the X-Men stories. She says,
I got close with fake Pietro.
she's talking about this conversation.
How'd you even do all this?
But here's the thing. Wanda genuinely doesn't seem to know how any of this started. It's like she's blocked out the creation of Westview to shield herself from trauma. I theorized about this in my Two Wandas video, where I posited that Wanda created a split personality for herself to live life inside the sitcom, like Smeagol and Gollum.
Nobody likes you.
Not listening.
Check that video out if you have time. Speaking of theories that turned out right, all the way back in episode 1, I theorized. See, I think that growing up in Sokovia, she used to watch American sitcoms, and she used these TV shows as an escape, a way to cope with her war-torn childhood. This is perhaps hinted at with the ad on the calendar, where a little girl is watching TV and the caption reads, "All the little girl wants is a color television." And I was dead on the money with that one. In their suitcase of these American lives, we see DVDs for Who's the Boss, Bewitched, Addams Family, Malcolm in the Middle, I Love Lucy, and I Dream of Jeannie. Now, to create her sitcom reality, Wanda copied the opening credits of I Love Lucy, Bewitched, and Malcolm in the Middle, while borrowing the premise of Addams Family and I Dream of Jeannie. Who's the Boss is about a man moving from a rough area in Brooklyn to a nice suburb of Connecticut, where he works as a housekeeper for a well-to-do family. Similarly, Wanda flees from her Sokovian childhood into a life in the Westview suburb, where she controls the Vision, just as Angela controlled Tony.
Who's the boss?
In this case, Wanda is the boss of Vision. Young Wanda's favorite TV episode is the classic Walnut episode of The Dick Van Dyke Show. Now, this was actually a pioneer in sitcoms, paving the way for other dream episodes like Mork from Work on Happy Days, When Ben Seaver Broke the Fourth Wall, or Aliens Stealing Al Bundy's Socks. You'll notice that Wanda in episode 2 modeled her hair after Laura Petrie, and the episode 1 opening credits mimic the Dick Van Dyke Shows. The Walnut episode begins and ends with Rob and Laura watching a horror movie in bed, and they become engrossed in the story. It scares Laura.
Rob, that's enough!
And Rob has a nightmare that he lives out the alien invasion from the film. Now, the act of a couple being absorbed by a TV show is a mirror for WandaVision itself. Rob describes opening a walnut to find an alien gem inside.
It was a strange-looking object, and it gave off a glow.
And this is also describing the gem inside Loki's scepter, which contains the Mind Stone. And by the end of the episode, the dream has spun out of control, just like Wanda is losing control of her dream. Laura's been taken over by aliens, just as by the end of this episode, Vision's been taken over by S.W.O.R.D. But the episode ends with Rob and Laura fully awake, but still wanting to watch TV. Maybe this foreshadows the ending of this show, where Vision and Wanda will choose to live their life inside the TV dream world, even after being woken up from the illusion. The whole Sokovian sequence is so damn sad. I'm glad we got to see this on screen, because I always thought this would have been a stronger opening to Age of Ultron, instead of hearing their backstory through dialogue. But then we get one of the biggest reveals in the episode. Wanda has always had powers. She is a natural-born witch.
Used a probability hex.
Now, in the comics, Wanda was originally, of course, born a mutant. So does this mean that she's now confirmed as the first mutant in the MCU? Does this mean the X-Men are nigh? Well, hold on. In the comics, Wanda's origin was later retconned to say that she is not a mutant. She is actually the latest in a long line of Scarlet Witches, but more on that later. I still think they're going to hold off the mutant reveal for its own movie later on. Now, you probably noticed that the Stark shell makes the same sound as the toaster commercial, and has the same blinking light. This reinforces the theory that the commercials are revisiting Wanda's past traumas. I have a theory about who's doing this that I'm going to break down in a video coming out soon, so subscribe and click the bell to make that happen. Agatha calls this
Used a probability hex,
which was Wanda's original power in the comics. I also like this recon because it explains why high-quality engineering like a Stark shell would suddenly perform like it was built by Justin Hammer.
Hammer tech? Yeah.
Henry Andres on Twitter pointed out to me that Wanda and Pietro are played by different actors than they were in their flashback. That's because the flashback in episode 6 was part of the fantasy reality and didn't reflect the real life that Wanda and Pietro have lived. In the HYDRA labs, the German technicians reminded me of this quote.
What kind of monster would let a German scientist experiment on them to protect their country?
This scene is also packed with reveals. For one, we see that the Mind Stone emerged from Loki's scepter like it was choosing Wanda. If you remember, Ultron alluded to something along these lines. After the twins tell him their origin story, he says,
I wondered why only you two survived Strucker's experiments. Now I don't.
Now, perhaps Ultron, being a supercomputer whose consciousness was created by the Mind Stone, was able to calculate the improbability of the shell failing. Then he would understand that the Mind Stone chose Wanda because she had pre-existing abilities. Now, when she looks into the Mind Stone, which is shaped like a hexagon, she sees the same burning visage of the classic Scarlet Witch from the comics. Remember, this is the same costume that Wanda wore in episode 5, so maybe she subconsciously remembered this image and created the costume for herself. It's interesting that she says the costume is,
I'm a Sokovian fortune teller.
When the Mind Stone in a way was a fortune teller, showing her her future. It seems like the MCU is setting up Wanda to be a Phoenix-type character.
I am Phoenix!
An extremely powerful, naturally gifted woman with red hair who is possessed by
phenomenal cosmic power
that she can't control. Now, this plan for Wanda could have been in place before Disney ever bought Fox, but isn't it great that Marvel's off-brand Dark Phoenix saga is already better than the 2 movies Fox made about the same story?
I love you.
What you say?
I also think that she subconsciously gave Pietro the power of another Infinity Stone, the Space Stone. She did this to give him super speed so he could always escape danger and be out of harm. Ooh, that backfired.
You didn't see that coming.
As the scientists are watching Wanda, notice that her encounter with the Mind Stone has been edited out of the recording, the same way she edits scenes out of the WandaVision show. But when she first fought Captain America, she displayed a similar power to edit and rewind time. In her cell, she's watching the Brady Bunch episode, Kitty Carry All is Missing, which, yeah, has a ton of parallels to WandaVision. In that episode, Cindy has a doll named Kitty Carry All that she treats like an actual baby, just like Wanda treats her imaginary babies like they're real.
She hasn't got any feelings. She's full of sawdust or rags or something.
And treating an artificial construct like it's alive is what she's doing with the Vision.
Get the light.
Cindy's doll goes missing, just like the Vision does, and this connection was foreshadowed when he changed a Kitty Carry-All diaper back in episode 3. Also, this sound effect is from Star Wars.
Relatively unprotected.
Now, my amazing coconut friend Charles had an Easter egg that he noticed. What was that, buddy? Excellent. Truly excellent. Let me know if you agree with Charles down in the comments. As we move through Wanda's life, the decades of the TV shows also advance, just like they do in WandaVision. As this scene begins, the Avengers theme is played in a minor key.
Oh, Wanda, moving on up.
Vision enters just like he did in Civil War when she warned him about boundaries.
Liz, we talked about this.
She's watching the Malcolm in the Middle episode, Health Insurance, which, you guessed it, has parallels to this episode. In that show, Hal forgets to pay the family's health insurance, so he has to hide the truth from Lois, just as Wanda is hiding the truth about Westview from Vision. Hal even locks the kids in their room to keep them safe, just like what happened to Wanda in Civil War.
You locked me in my room.
And then, Hal breaks his leg just as Vision's body is broken by Sword. I just gotta take a minute to mention how damn sad this episode is. It's heart-wrenching. And as always, it's Vision, the least human character, who's best able to define our humanity.
But what is grief? If not love, persevering.
The whole episode is framed like Agatha is Wanda's therapist, helping her to cope with trauma.
I can't do this anymore.
Come on, Wanda. You're on the precipice. You are right there.
So we see what actually happened when Wanda entered S.W.O.R.D., proving that Hayward isn't just a jerk, he's a liar. That's interesting that Hayward also found a way to edit events to fit his own narrative, just like Wanda does. Now the visual of him being disassembled and spread out on these tables is straight from the West Coast Avengers comic, when the government disassembled Vision and wiped his memory. Hayward drops this line.
Not everyone has the kind of power that could bring their soulmate back online.
Now, there's a few ways to read this. Maybe he actually misspoke, or Wanda misremembered what he said. Or he was hoping Wanda would use her energy to restart Vision, which is what happens at the end of the episode. I've never been a big proponent of the Hayward is Mephisto theory, but there are just too many coincidences piling up around Hayward to ignore. I'll do a full theory breakdown at the end of the video.
It's fine. Let her see for herself.
WandaVision is one of many Marvel Disney Plus shows coming out this year. But did you know that there's a new feature on Disney Plus called Star that lets you access mature content like Family Guy, Die Hard, or the Alien franchise? But Star is only available if you live in the UK, Europe, Canada, Australia, or New Zealand. What? So if you don't live in any of those countries and you don't want to travel there, there's a cheaper solution. Get NordVPN, the sponsor of this week's video. Nord has thousands of super fast servers all over the world. So you're able to register your IP address from another country where Disney Plus is streaming the R-rated movie that you want to watch. If you are interested, go to nordvpn.com/ScreenCrush to get a huge discount off a 2-year plan, and use the code ScreenCrush to get an extra month for free. And if you find out the service isn't right for you, no pressure, there's a 30-day money-back guarantee. See, lots of streaming sites offer different programming in other countries. Using NordVPN is the best way to get your money's worth out of all these different streaming services. It's like adding free streaming sites on top of the ones that you're already paying for. I've actually dropped one of my other subscription services because NordVPN has given me access to so many shows and movies that aren't on Disney Plus in the US. So again, visit nordvpn.com/ScreenCrush or click the link down in the description below. All right, back to the Easter eggs. When Wanda says,
I can't feel you.
It's heartbreaking because it calls back to this moment.
I just feel you.
Then we go to Westview, the town that time has left behind. Like a lot of small towns, it's seen better days. And the snap probably didn't help. There's no more concerts, just a musician trying to get by selling piano lessons. Of course, we see Deborah Jo Rupp, the gazebo is in disrepair, and here's Dennis the mailman as a pizza guy. Now, this is all very strange. This is an empty lot in Westview. It looks like Vision bought this for Wanda to grow old in. But the lot is an empty shell, just like the Vision himself. Now notice the heart around this, like the heart in the calendar in episode 1, showing us that this takes place just before the beginning of that episode. But again, Wanda seems to have selective amnesia when she's in the sitcom world.
That's not exactly how I remember it.
But isn't it a hell of a coincidence that this empty lot that Vision bought for her is next to a really old witch dungeon in the same town where Jimmy Woo has a missing witness? I definitely think that this deed was bequeathed to Wanda in the name of the Vision, but it was actually given to her by the big bad villain who's secretly pulling all the strings. The house sits on Sherwood Drive, and Chris Colley on Twitter pointed out to me that the Brady Bunch was created by Sherwood Schwartz. So then Wanda has an explosion of grief, just like in Age of Ultron. She reassembles reality in blocks, just like she did on this House of M cover, thanks to Frank Bono for pointing that out. In House of M, Wanda creates an alternate reality where Magneto rules the world, but she does this subconsciously. Just like here, she didn't remember creating Westview. So then the hexagonal energy moves outward from the home. Symbolically, this is a nice touch, since the home is the center of family sitcom life. Westview transforms. This billboard is for Westview Dairy, who make the milk that we've seen in past episodes. And then this billboard for Lagos Paper Towels brags that you can clean up in a Thanos-like snap. This is taking two tragedies from Wanda's life, the Lagos explosion and Thanos killing Vision, and reducing them to advertisements. Just as all the early commercials reduced all of Wanda's traumas to bite-sized, inconsequential events. D4 Phillips on Twitter pointed out that the marquee originally featured the name of a warp station in Blade Runner, where Roy flew gypsy ships.
I watched sea beams glitter in the dark near the 10-house gate.
Roy was a replicant, an artificial man like the Vision, and Wanda is descended from gypsies. But also, Blade Runner is about identifying and hunting down artificial life, like Hayward is doing in this episode. The marquee changes to the movies Kidnapped and Big Red. Big Red! Big Red! also the name of the gum that got Vision hammered in episode 2. When she recreates Vision, we see him form in the reflection of a TV set. This is because this new Vision is a reflection of Wanda's views of the perfect TV sitcom life. So, is this really the Vision? Or, like the moon reflects the sun, is he only a reflection of life from Wanda? When he becomes suspicious of Wanda, is this because Wanda imagines he would be suspicious, or because he's actually autonomous? I think that Wanda was able to resurrect the Vision because of their shared connection through the Mind Stone. The magic that recreates the Vision is even yellow, like the Mind Stone, implying that Wanda has recreated the Mind Stone's energy, and not just reformed Vision with her own powers. This is actually the episode that I thought would be the pilot, when we see the creation of Wanda's sitcom fantasy. Delaying this revelation until now was a brilliant move by the show's creators because it built mystery and buzz. Afterwards, she's able to see the set and studio where they filmed the actual episode of WandaVision in front of a studio audience. Now, this isn't breaking the fourth wall just for the sake of it. This is Agatha's way of forcing Wanda to finally confront that the life she's created is an illusion. Outside, she has the boys hostage and seems to imply that the children and Vision are actual real beings and not mirages.
Capable of spontaneous creation. Your children. Vision. This whole little life you've made.
She also name drops chaos magic, which was Wanda's power in the comics. And then she finally drops the name that we've all been waiting to hear, the greatest Easter egg in this episode.
And that makes you
your mom. I'm just kidding.
The Scarlet Witch.
Now, this reveal was actually teased a few episodes ago when Hayward said this.
No funny nickname?
So it seems like Scarlet Witch is an ancient entity, like the Phoenix Force, that possesses the Chosen One. The Nightflower on Twitter even suggested that the Scarlet Witch, who Wanda sees, is actually a Scarlet Witch from a different reality. This is a cool theory, because Wanda is a Nexus being, basically a person who is constant and unchanged in multiple universes. Last week, I lamented that Agatha was being set up as an adversarial figure to Wanda and not a mentor. This week, it looks like Agatha's goal was to uncover who Wanda really is, but now she views her as a threat and wants to stop her. I think there is another reveal coming, another villain tied to the book that's in the basement. And that in the end, Wanda, Monica, and Agatha will band together to stop this mastermind villain, mirroring the Mother, Maiden, and Crone brooch that Agatha wears. Also, the episode both begins and ends with witches facing off, and with an older witch claiming the younger one is too powerful and too dangerous to live. Remember, Agatha's mother told her,
"You practice the darkest of magic."
If that's the case, maybe Agatha has been drawn in too far by this dark magic. Maybe she is being manipulated by a mastermind villain like Mephisto or Nightmare. Now, if there is a mastermind villain, here's everything they would have done. They would have used Hayward to implant the idea of bringing the Vision back in Wanda's head.
Not everyone has the kind of power that could bring their soulmate back online.
They set up a fake deed conveniently next door to a secret witch dungeon, then attracted Agatha to this same witch dungeon, used this reality to influence Wanda to create children. And somehow this is also all tied back to the book in the basement that's emanating with red energy. It could be that this is all Agatha, mind-controlling Hayward and then sending Wanda the fake deed next to the dungeon that she found. But Agatha is trying to figure out what's happening here. She's not the mastermind. Maybe it's Hayward. He could have easily forged the documentation in the house to draw Wanda to the spot in a town where he knew there was an FBI witness. But that doesn't explain why he would have known there was a witch dungeon next door. So that implies that there's a different villain. The dream symbolism of the Dick Van Dyke Show could be a hint that the villain is Nightmare. Or the villain Cthulhu is also an ancient evil who has possessed Wanda in the comics. He was also trapped inside a magic book. So maybe Wanda generating the hex is actually prying this book open. And maybe in the finale, Agatha will help her seal the demon inside. But let me know all of your theories down in the comments. The Nightflower on Twitter pointed out to me that there is no please stand by at the end of this episode. I think that's because the sitcom reality has finally ended now that Wanda has confronted the truth. So now let's talk about the post-credits scene. SWORD is able to use the residual energy from Stark's drone to reanimate the Vision's body. Comic fans will recognize this blank Vision from the West Coast Avengers after he was reassembled and his mind was wiped. It's appropriate that they used a Stark drone, since Stark was one of Vision's original co-creators in Age of Ultron.
I want to help you put Jarvis in this thing.
But the comics also tell us how Vision can return from the dead. In the books, blank Vision's mind is transferred into the body of a Vision from an alternate reality. Afterwards, he has his red skin and access to his original personality. The show could end with Vision fighting Vision like in Superman 3. Then, good Vision phases into blank Vision and takes over his body. Remember, Paul Bettany has been teasing that there's an actor in this show that he's always wanted to work with. D4 Phillips on Twitter wonders, could this mystery actor actually be Paul Bettany himself? Well, that's all the Easter eggs that I managed to find, but if you found any, let me know in the comments below or at me on Twitter. And if it's your first time here, please subscribe. For ScreenCrush, I'm Ryan Airy.